we are lucky enough to be focusing on this emanation of Tara. So lots of folks are coming in, and I'm just looking at my little time thing. I think what I'm going to do, what I just did was to take a deep breath. So I would encourage you all to do that too. And I think I'm going to go ahead. It's about 5 after. I'm going to go ahead and ring this one bell. And yeah, and give you the usual invitation to arrive. So here we go. So as I often do, I really want to invite you to see how you are. And I think it'll be nice when we come back after this moment, if a couple of people want to say how they are. Just check in with yourself. How are you doing? How are you feeling in this moment? And in an interesting kind of spacious way, let yourself be how you are. And also notice if there's any contraction going on in your body where there's just tension around something. To do this paradoxical thing of letting go of some of that tension and really letting go into being held by whatever you're sitting on, actually feeling the contact points that your body has with whatever you're sitting on. And then however your feet are connected to the floor, to really imagine that you can feel the earth rising up to meet you. And so I'm sort of paradoxically inviting you to both feel how you are and also let go a little bit. And notice your breathing. Don't try to change it, just notice it. And as you're noticing it, let yourself realize that breathing is one of the ways that we are all connecting with each other, whether we're saying anything or not. And so slowly, 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 seeing if you can allow some letting go and letting go into connection, with yourself, with everybody who's here, everything around us, with all the beings that are supporting us all the time. And if a deep breath comes to you, take it. I just don't like to tell people, take a deep breath. That is something I've never enjoyed. It's like, but if one comes, enjoy it. And then just travel on your breath back to this gathering, back to being together. And yeah, I will say briefly, and then I'll just see if anyone else feels like volunteering anything. It is definitely, as Snoopy would say back in the day, it's a dark and stormy night here in North Carolina. And we're famous for getting ice storms. I think one is on the way, and often we lose power. So it's a good night for the Black Madonna. It's a dark and stormy night here in North Carolina. So I wonder if anybody actually might feel moved to say how you are doing in relationship to the collective, or just in relationship to yourself, if anybody would like to say anything. Kylie?
Good morning, everybody. Especially today, I've got an underlying sort of anxiety and fear. I've been drinking, I've made up a mix of bark flowers, which really help. But there's, I don't know, I just pick up on scary. And I want to be able to, like, just what you said, recognize it and then let it go. But a lot of the time I find I'm Velcroed in, and I just, yeah, I don't like it. I don't like the sort of high alert. I'm on high alert.
Yeah.
But I'm learning how to recognize that and let it be and say hello to it and feel where it is in my body. But it's there. It's there now, and I don't understand why, because I'm usually really elated when I come into this group, but I've got it sort of in my gut and my solar plexus. So,
well, thank you for saying that, and I love the expression of Velcroed in. That really, that's a great description. And I also want to say, I feel some of that too. I have this fantasy, it's because of what's going down in the United States, but there's a lot going down all over the world. And so I do like to encourage people to ask themselves how much of any anxiety we have is related to the collective anxiety around the world. Yeah, I just think we're impacted by lots of energies now. And yeah, and again, this is a good thing to bring to this practice tonight. So let it be here. Yeah, thank you, Kylie. Anybody else? Hey, Sarah. You have to unmute.
My husband and I have been having some very intense discussions about aging and family and where we live and stuff. And I'm getting really clear about some difficult things, and it's really floors him. I mean, some of we have step family relationships, and it's tricky. And I don't know. I don't want to go through the whole thing. Right. Just very emotionally intense and complicated. And I have to talk about it and get it out there on the table. And then he's just flattened when I tell him what I really think and how I feel about things. He's in bed today.
Oh.
Yeah, because it's really painful for him to acknowledge the things that are difficult. He just does not want it to be like that. I don't either, but
yeah.
I'm not going to let myself be in the care of people I don't trust when I'm old.
Wow.
So it's a hard one.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. I want to.
Yeah. And it'll be okay. You know, it will be okay. But I have to say, where's my boundary?
Right. And if it's not okay, that you also have to say that too.
Well, it has to be worked with. We have to work with it. And we have to help other people. You know, when you're young, you don't understand what it's like for people who are old.
Yeah.
And by the time you get old, it's like, I don't know. I could go on and on. Thank you, everybody.
You're welcome. I can relate. Just let me say that.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit behind you, but I can definitely relate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Susan is saying, yeah, me too. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah. And Susan, I would love to get in touch with you sometime. I live in the Central Valley too, so maybe we can work that out.
Yeah, maybe y'all can put your email addresses in the chat box so you can find each other.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
maybe one more person, and then I will launch into. Hey, Linda.
Hi there.
Hey.
I'm real glad to be here.
Welcome.
Thank you. I have COVID.
Oh, wow.
I'm doing okay. It was a little rough last week. I'm fully vaccinated. It's a breakthrough.
Hmm.
And I just kind of want to put that out there. I think that's a thing to offer into
Sure.
this moment, maybe. And
Yeah.
I'm very appreciative in a certain way, because I've lost folks, that I have it now. I'm alive, you know, and it's a different virus, and it's a different moment, and I'm appreciative of that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for letting us know. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I want to say many things, as you all know. And I have, first I want to show you some different versions of some of the Black goddesses. And I'm going to start with one who is a living Black goddess. This is Amma. You guys know Amma? Is that not fabulous? So her devotees make these dolls, and I've had her since 1996, I think. I actually saw her and His Holiness the same weekend. And I found out they were both, I was going to London to see His Holiness, and somebody told me Amma was going to be there. So I got to see them both in the same weekend, and I had just seen Mother Mira a couple of weeks earlier, so it was pretty great. But I don't know if you can see her hands. She's gotten a lot of wear and tear over 25 years. And I was communicating with somebody, I wonder if it was somebody in this group, who said she had an opportunity once to buy one of these dolls and she didn't do it, and she regretted it ever since. And I am lucky because I had that experience. I went to an Amma thing, which is, just wild and crazy. And I wanted to buy one and I didn't, because I felt silly. I'm an adult, I'm going to buy a doll. And so I didn't get it. And then I told myself, if I ever have the chance to do that again, I'm going to do it. So I did, and I did. And I think, okay, I will, here's another one that fits with what I want to say. So this is the Black Madonna of Montserrat in Spain. And, what you can see is she's holding Jesus in her lap. She's also holding the world. Can y'all see that? And he's holding something, and I don't know what that is. It looks like a fruit or something. Looks like a natural something. I'd have to look it up to see what that is. But what this image reminds me of is the Great Mother holding the divine child. And that's when I think of this Amma doll, it's like, I'm holding the doll, but the doll is holding me, kind of thing. And also, just to say, I have many Black Madonnas. This is just one. The first, when you decide to go on this crazy journey of becoming a Jungian analyst, you have to write these symbol papers. And the first symbol paper I ever wrote about was the Black Madonna. So that was probably in, I don't know, 1989, 1990, something like that. And that image of the Black Goddess has been with me ever since. And, you know, the truth of the matter is she's been with all of us from the beginning. I mean, you see her everywhere, Kali, you know, this image of Mary holding Jesus is a very identical to the statues of Isis in Egypt holding Horus. And many people think that's where the Black Madonnas originally came from, was they were brought from Egypt into Europe. And they're all over the world. You don't see them so much in the United States, but there are some here. And there are stories where in some places, you know, the powers that be they weren't too keen on this idea of this Black Madonna. And they tried to say she would turn black because of all the candles people lit in front of her, which could not be further from the truth. And there was a story of one where, you know, they took the statue down and they took the paint off. I don't know what they did. They painted her white. And there's such an outrage among the community that they had to paint her back black. So it's like, we need that. We need that grounded, earthy, dark mother. So this is a photo of a statue of Black Tara. And that statue is in Erlenbach, where Lodrö Rinpoche is teaching from. And all I can tell you is that I hope you get to go there someday and see it in person, but it's there. And what made me think of this, that, you know, the first symbol paper I ever wrote about was the Black Madonna, is I remember when I wrote it, I just feel like, oh my God, you can't pin this thing down. I don't care what you say about the Black Madonna, you will not have said it all. And I remember thinking, what do I include? What do I leave out? How in the world am I ever going to do this? And that's how I felt getting ready for this tonight. It's like, oh my God, there's so much. And now there's so much more, because, you know, the longer you live, the more you're going to run into. So it just reminded me of that time. And then the other thing was, when I wrote that paper, you know, you think you know why you're writing a paper. And I didn't know why I was writing that paper until I got to the very end. And it was, you know, I'm sitting in my kitchen with one of the first Macintoshes there ever were, those things that looked like little boxes. And all of a sudden what comes out of my finger was, I realized, you know, that I was looking for this dark feminine in myself that I didn't even know existed. So that was an interesting discovery to make. And, you know, the other thing I want to say is that the origins of these goddesses, including Tara, go back to Samaria. They go back to Inanna. And, you know, I'm just going to be going back and forth as I always do. So when you read the praise to this Black Tara, I praise the one who stamps with her foot and strikes the surface of the world's foundation with the palm of her hand, whose frowning expression masters the 7 levels of the underworld through the syllable hum. Masters the 7 levels of the underworld through the syllable hum. Well, by the time I got this initiation and read that praise, I was like, oh, that's the journey of Inanna. She descends 7 levels into the underworld, and has this encounter with her sister, Ereshkigal. And so I thought to myself, well, there's no way that this text has not got some connection to Samaria. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure I've never told y'all this story. So one of the things I had to do to graduate from the Young Institute was take a religion exam. And I decided what I wanted to talk about was the interconnection between all these different goddesses, Inanna and Tara and the Black Madonna and Kali, and actually also the white buffalo calf woman from the Lakota nation. Because one of the things the stories of these dark goddesses have in common is you don't screw around with them. You can see that hand, right? And so the story of the buffalo calf woman has to do with what happens to one of the warriors who does, try to approach her inappropriately, and he ends up being reduced to a pile of ashes, which is what this Tara does with these interfering spirits. But anyway, so that's what I was going to do in my exam. And I need to make this story a little bit shorter, but somehow I said something that offended this woman who was one of the examiners. And when I said, I'm going to, what I want to do in this exam is make this comparison between these things, she says to me, you can't do that. You just can't do that. She said, I am an ethnologist. And she said it like that. I am an ethnologist. And I can tell you that unless you know everything about every one of those cultures and what all those symbols mean in those cultures, you can't make those kind of comparisons. And I thought to myself, yes, and I am screwed. This is not a good development. So the other person, there were two people whom I know quite well, and I'll talk about him in a minute, realized this was not going to go well. And so he said to me, so Rachel, why don't you just pick one? Why don't you just pick one of these things and just talk about one of them? Why don't you talk about Inanna? And to this day, I really don't know why I said, no, I'm going to talk about Tara. So I did. And, the end result was I knew when I left that room that, she couldn't fail me, but I knew she knew she wanted to. And I figured the other guy would not let that happen, and probably I would just pass, but that would be the end of it, which was fine. But anyway, but then, as I said, my premise was I want to talk about how these things were all connected. And 2 nights later, I had this dream that Andreas, this man I'm just talking about, was sitting at a table. And it was much like the table in the exam room. When the exam, I had brought all these things. I had brought pictures and a statue and stuff. Anyway, in the dream, there's nothing on the table. And he's sitting in a chair. And I took the palm of my hand and slammed it down on the table and said, these things are connected. End of the dream. Does that sound familiar? She slams the palm of her hand. Anyway, so I called Andreas and I said, we need to talk. And so Andreas, actually, it's his friend Martin Koff that introduced me to Lodrö Rinpoche. So these things are all connected every which way. But when I went to talk to him about it, he said to me, do you see emptiness in the dream? I'm like, what? He said, well, in the actual exam, the table was full of things. In your dream, there's nothing on the table. So I think this is emptiness appearing in your dream, which I thought was pretty right on. And also pretty good for an analyst who's not that interested in Buddhism. Anyway, so about 6 months later, I had another dream, and I don't know who I was talking to, but I was saying, hey, I know these things are connected. That's clear. These things are all connected. So what? I don't want to write a book about it, and I don't want to go around talking about it. So what difference does it make if they're all connected? Well, it sort of turns out that, it worked out a little differently from that. But I think the topic of emptiness and the topic of everything being connected. I mean, all the Taras are about that. There's no question about that. But I think the Black Tara, like these Black Madonnas, are such a powerful representation of that, because the black is really the void. And the black is what is containing everything. There's no single one thing, right? It's containing everything. And from that darkness, anything can arise. And I also think that, one of the things that tantric practices profoundly encourage us to do is to bring everything to it, is not to leave anything out. And so we're going to bring our anxiety, and we're going to bring our complexes, as the Jungian would say. We're going to bring our exhaustion. We're going to bring our doubt. We're going to bring everything. And this idea that what we've got is an emanation of a deity in a subtle body of black light. That, I mean, even I used to think this when I'd go, there's a Black Madonna in Einsiedeln, which is very close to where I lived in near Zurich. I used to go there all the time and just sit at her feet. And one day I was sitting there and it's like, oh, the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Here's a form, but it's completely black. So there's emptiness right there in the form. And then the form is in the emptiness, So for me, this Black Tara and her holding power, I think that's why when I, wrote that little sentence that's on the cards, and that's also in the book chapter, and I'm not sure, I think I have it, that her fierce compassion sustains you as you confront the depths of your fears. Where that came from, for me, where that came from was this praise, this idea of descending 7 levels into the underworld. And it's like, some of the other lamas talk about how this Tara is particularly about dissolving the most subtle obstacles. One teacher was saying, like, it's the last 2%. And so it's really easy for me to intuitively recognize that as you go deeper and deeper and deeper, you're going to run into more and more subtle things, and actually probably more and more repressed things, or things that have never been dealt with. And it just takes a lot of courage to go that deep. It can be really scary. And the idea that we can really imagine and kind of feel into this really fierce compassion, that nothing we bring to her is going to faze her in the slightest. I just like to think you can just bring the worst. You can give it everything you've got, and she's going to go, yeah, no. I've already heard that. That's my humorous rendition. But I just know that when we start facing the really difficult stuff, and if we have sort of habitual conditioned patterns that have been kicking in for large parts of our lives, and often those patterns are trauma related, things like shutting down, things like dissociation, things like feeling I'm not connected to anything, that, those are actually old defenses, and they're neurological patterns. I really like to remind people when somebody says something like, oh, I just really shut down, I like to say to people, actually, what shutting down is happening to you. None of us sit down and say, oh, I think I'll just go in the next room and shut down now. Or gee, I think it's time for me to sit down and just go talk ugly to myself, talk trash to myself. We don't do that. It's really kind of autonomous. And it's this reflexive pattern that's coming from the nervous system. So to interrupt those patterns and to just catch it, which is what I think meditation practice actually helps us catch stuff and go, oh, I'm getting ready to go down that rabbit hole. And I really don't want to. So to call on Tara is really like saying, I'm going to invoke this phenomenal female deity who really represents everything, but clearly she represents compassion. And to think that no matter how deep I go, I have company. I am accompanied. So it's almost like, again, this statue of Mary and Jesus is like that you've got these many manifestations of Tara. They can protect, they can bring joy, they can increase, they can bring peace. But the other thing they can do, and particularly this one, is that they can hold the brokenness. And I think it's that, the deep wish to move away from these conditioned patterns into a new pattern where we can just actually sit with the brokenness. Frankly, I just think we need a lot of help to do that. So in a minute, when we do the practice, I really want to talk more about what it means to take refuge, because I think this black Tara brings sort of an extra valence to that, what it means to take refuge. When you kind of are in that place where you're not sure there's anything to take refuge in, but you do it anyway. So I will get to that in a minute when we talk about that. But when I talk about that, but one of the things I want to say is, well, just lots of gratitude. One of the things I did to, try to say, well, what will I talk about tonight, was look back over all the different times that I've talked about this Tara over the years. And I could really see these different influences throughout those years. And a lot of gratitude for being in a position where, for instance, I could live in Zurich for 3.5 years and immerse in all of this stuff. But one of the things I got from that study was really there is almost no culture that doesn't have a myth connected to a descent into the underworld. I mean, even if you read certain texts that have to do with Jesus, where he descends into hell after he dies, that's quite an interesting text to read. There's just almost no culture on earth that doesn't have a myth that has to do with the descent into the underworld. And I think there's this profound wisdom there, that there's some things we can never see unless there's no light. And the easiest example is when you think about the new moon, how many stars you can see during the phase of the new moon that you can't see when the moon is full. I also want to say, because I think this is important for all of us in this era, is how we, especially with English, have used the words light and dark. And so light is always bright and often white. Light is all good, enlightenment. This person's bright. This person's brilliant. that all these metaphors of light that are connected to goodness, and often they were connected to maleness and, the yang energy of things. And then dark got associated with the feminine and with, bad things. And so we say, oh, I'm in a dark mood. I'm in a dark place. And I just think it's just been entirely too easy. And it's just happened through the centuries that a lot of that stuff gets projected onto people with dark colored skin. And so I think for me, I mean, when I came into contact with the Black Madonna, and again, I just want to say the picture has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, but it was really clear to me that even in my own psyche, that I was connecting, these dark phases, even the dark phases of my life, like depression or something, with something bad, as opposed to something that's phenomenally rich, and that, that sometimes there are things we'll never see if we don't turn out the lights, turn out the normal lights or the normal ways we have of looking at things. So one myth I wanted to mention, and my friend Andreas is actually an Egyptologist, and he's the one who told me about this, but it's the myth of the descent of Ra, the sun god, into the underworld. And so for the Egyptians, they didn't take it for granted that the sun came up every morning. They had this idea that the sun god was descending into the underworld, every night and then coming back out the next morning. So there's this very, very detailed and particular description in an Egyptian text of that journey. And it just kind of gets, they're more and more, he's getting more and more different kinds of beings coming at him as he's going through. But actually, I think there are people in his boat with him, helping him navigate, but still, it's like when he gets to the really into the deepest part of the depths where everything becomes absolutely black, so dark, that it's at that point that this new spark of light happens. And one of the things that Andreas felt like this myth was trying to say is that spark at that point is really going to be something new. It's going to come from a place where all our habitual ways of seeing and thinking are occluded. And so there's this opportunity for this new spark to occur. And I think if we have that mindset, we are more likely to be open to that, to kind of not be digging for it, but just to be alert to the fact that can show up. And honestly, in recent years, I think about, how the Tibetans describe the process of dying, which is these different stages, but the final stage is complete blackness. It's very similar. And it's like from that place of utter and complete blackness is where the clear light dawns. And if you recognize, and it happens pretty fast, if you recognize it and you can stay with it, that's the opportunity to become enlightened in the process of dying. So I think these people are connected to each other, if I can say that. So one thing I just looking to see what I particularly want to say. I have a variety of things that I wanted to bring into this space without necessarily saying, oh, and this is connected to that, to that, to that, but just to bring them into the space and just offer them to you, and then let you all see, where it lands for you and how it connects. So one of the things I think, I think I mentioned this in the book, and I might have mentioned it to a group I was teaching last week, but a lot of times we'll just do anything to avoid resting in this darkness. It's so scary to us. And I know myself, it's like one of the things that I just will do is like, I have this list of things to do, man. And all of a sudden that list of things to do is doing me instead of me doing it. And I think that's one way of compensating for, this anxiety, like what you're talking about, Kylie. But anyway, this is a book that I would really recommend to anyone who's interested, by the Reverend Dr. Barbara Holmes, who's a Black theologian. And the book is called Crisis Contemplation, Healing the Wounded Village. It's a beautiful cover. She's on the faculty of Richard Rohr's, the Center for Action and Contemplation. So she's very much in the contemplative tradition. But so this is one of the things that I just love this. She says a crisis forces those caught in its clutches to come to terms with the fact that life as we knew it may never be the same. When the crisis strikes, the response from the village must be a pause. And that was the sentence that really got my attention. The response from the village must be a pause. There's little that we can do, but we can be. We can listen. We can love our neighbors. And we can host the spirit that flutters over every dawning day. So I love that. I just want to mention that because I think, I don't know about you guys, but I certainly have a tendency to overdo when what I really need to do is to stop. And I think she's sort of, even I was noticing this, like last night I was aware, unfortunately, before I went to bed, what had happened in the Senate. I was not happy. It's not a happy camper when I went to sleep. And I got up this morning and I just started watching all the emails kind of, falling into my inbox from all these various people. And then I was thinking a lot about how African Americans in this country have had to face these kinds of moments over and over and over again. And thinking about what are the habitual ways that people respond? And seeing that in my email, but also hearing it from people, like a couple of my friends said, I just like this, I just can't take it anymore. I just can't pay attention. I have to just shut it out. And then here come all these emails about, okay, well, we lost, but this is what we can do next. And then there's all this stuff about what we can do. I even was in a conversation with a friend of mine about what can we do this morning. But then I thought, okay, that's just a real, there's no pause there. There's no pause. And then I noticed, well, what's happening to me if I don't go there? Here comes the despair and all this stuff. And I thought, well, that's not it either. That's really not it either. And so, again, I was thinking about this practice. I was thinking about the elements of the practice. And this comes to that discussion that I wanted to have about refuge, which is, if I'm going to really take this seriously, this thing I teach, this thing I do, that taking refuge in the Buddha, which is really taking refuge in this awakened consciousness, which is space, actually. It's vast, vast, vast potential, just vaster than we can imagine. You know, if I'm going to take refuge in the Buddha, in that consciousness, and as we do, and when we do the sadhana practice, remind myself that my consciousness is that vast, then I can imagine, like this Black Madonna, that there is something much bigger that can hold all this. So I don't have to do either thing. I don't have to go down the rabbit hole, and I don't also have to start thinking about what am I going to do. I can be in that space. And then thinking about, well, taking refuge in the Dharma. And I love how Lama Rod Owens talks about the Dharma can be anything, any text, any written word, spoken word, song that connects you to your own deepest self, right? And so I just was thinking about all the texts that I just love. And even this sentence that I read to you from Dr. Holmes, this idea, to me, that's the Dharma, and that's a text, and I can take refuge in it. And then here's a poem. See how I slide these things in there. Here is a poem from a 9th century Japanese female poet, Izumi Shikibu. Although the wind blows terribly here, the moonlight also leaks between the roof planks of this ruined house. So I'll just read that again. Although the wind blows terribly here, the moonlight also leaks between the roof planks of this ruined house. This is translated by Jane Hirschfield and Mariko Aratani. So that to me is a Dharma text. It is not hard for me to imagine being in some kind of hut or something, and feeling like the house is ruined, and then you just see, you can imagine the moonlight coming through those roof planks. Yes, thank you, Mary. So, just thinking about what are the Dharma texts, and then I think the last part is the Sangha. So even tonight, thinking about teaching, I just have to say today I was really tired, and kind of to say I was sad is really highly understating the factor, And I thought, oh my gosh, but then I started thinking about you all, and I could kind of picture some of you. I could picture the little squares and us being together, and I thought, it's just going to be better, just being together. No matter what is going on or what we're talking about, just being together, it's better. Well, for me, it is anyway. I hope it is for you too. And then I started thinking about, again, this Lama Rod's idea of the circle of care, the teachers. And I was thinking about, that's when I really started thinking about Martin Luther King and John Lewis, and particularly Howard Thurman. How did they pause? Because they had to pause, and then how did they continue on? And I've got, one thing, this is probably the last thing I'm going to read before I wrap this section up and we actually practice, but I was thinking about what in the world happened to Howard Thurman after King was assassinated? Because Thurman knew King since the time he was 7 years old, and he was friends with his parents. I think he was in seminary with his parents. And he was really Martin Luther King's spiritual guide, mentor, whatever. I thought, how in the world did he do that? And, it turns out that Thurman was a mystic, but Thurman was also what people like to call a nature mystic, which meant that, from the time of his earliest childhood, anything he ever recorded, it was really clear that he took refuge in the natural world and had an utterly indistinguishable boundary between himself and the natural world. And so what I want to read to you is something. This is a biography of Howard Thurman, Against the Hounds of Hell, by Peter Eisenstadt. This just came out this year. It's just incredible. It's incredible for any number of reasons, but if you're interested in Thurman, it's really incredible. And so I think Eisenstadt is commenting on Thurman's book, The Search for Common Ground, and talking about that Thurman expanded the common ground, not just between people, but between people and all beings. So the common ground was the entirety of being, not just human beings. And so this is what Eisenstadt wrote, and I think he's writing it, it's his words, but I think he's writing it based on Thurman's own writings. He said, I would only add that Thurman knew the odds African Americans and other disinherited peoples faced in overcoming segregation and its lingering inertial vestiges, and the vast task in trying to fight the entrenched will to maintain artificial human divisions and inequalities. Those who would dare challenge this needed not only God to be on their side, but also to enlist as allies everything that breathes and grows, every planet revolving around every star and every atom in the universe, and every cat that decides to appear right this moment. Anyway, so I think when I read that, I thought, oh my God, this to me is also the Black Tara, because it's really saying you've got to get big, you've got to get vast, you've got to go out into the space that contains everything. And at the same time, it expands for me the idea of the Sangha. And it feels to me like that this is what I wish everybody would do right now. Like, what if everybody on the globe was enlisting as allies everything that breathes and grows, every planet revolving around every star and every atom in the universe? I just want to encourage you all to do that. So yeah, I think to get through these kind of crises, regardless of what tradition you're looking at, I think what Buddhism and the other traditions too really invite us to do is to get past our conditioned responses, to connect with what is unconditioned, what is spontaneous, what is non-judgmental, what is pure awareness. Because as the teachings tell us, pure awareness, our Buddha nature, is really who we all already are. So I think one of the things we're doing when we do these practices is we're entering into a structure with these texts and these prayers, these powerful mantras, visualization, that actually help dispel our conditioned ways of seeing things and our conditioned ways of responding to things, and to open up the space for what needs to come in. And I think the Black Madonna and the black Tara are there to say, whatever comes in is what needs to come in. And there's something big enough to hold it, to hold you holding it. So I could probably find lots of other things to say, but I think I'm going to stop. And yeah, I think to also think about when we're really tired and we're really scared and we're really just want to stop, it's a pretty darn good idea to stop. It's a really good idea to do that. And, you know, to give ourselves the space to let things arise, but to also have something to call on so that we're not really having that sense, I'm in that space by myself. Yeah. And, you know, you'll notice this because we do it every time. Every time we start this practice, we start with space. That's where we go to first, is that image of space. And as one teacher pointed out recently, space is what allows the visualization to occur. You know, if you start with space, it's like you're emptying out everything else that's going on, and it's in that space that we invite Tara to appear. And so it is that black space, that open space, that space with no thing in it, that, you know, allows us to bring the visualization of Tara into our mind's eye. So I think it's time to practice. And I also just want to say, as I usually do, if there's anybody that would like to say any small or short or whatever, if there's anything that anybody wants to say before we practice, to please do that. And to also just kind of keep track. If it turns out there might be something you want to say after the practice, to please do that. Because as I like to remind everyone, we all have Tara arising within us. And so we all have teachings to offer, every one of us. So is there anybody who wants to say anything before we start?
Rachel, I'd like to.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I would like to say that I really appreciate this space, and it's really helped me to integrate a lot of things that I felt were separate, but that I felt were not separate, but that felt separate. I don't know how to explain that. And I saw that we were going to look at Black Tara today, but I really didn't connect it to the Black Madonna. I think it was about 7 years ago, my family is from Italy, and I went to visit them, and someone brought us to in northern Italy, in the Piemonte region, to a sanctuary in Europa, which is a Black Madonna sanctuary. And I had all these questions, right? Like, why is there a Black Madonna here? Like, what's going on? And everybody's like, it's just the Black Madonna. It's just like how it is, like, whatever, stop asking questions. I was like, okay, cool. But it was just, it was at like 1,000 meters above sea level. So wow. It was just, it was in the sky, you know, it was just so amazing. And I went into, so they had like this old sanctuary, like the old chapel where the like original, I put it in quotes because who knows, but like the original, like, I don't know, idol or whatever.
The statue.
And then they had like the more like modern version, and that was like a huge, you know, chapel with all like ornate stuff in it. And in that chapel, there was this Mary that I had never seen Mary that way. She was like ascended, like Jesus usually is like shown. With a crescent moon under her and a rainbow. And I was like, this is the gay Mary. Like, it's all here. Like, I've been looking for this my whole life, and here it is. And like, nobody, like, how can I talk about this? Like, who is, anyway, you know, I don't know. But I just wanted to share that because I wasn't expecting to think about that today. And I just, Rachel, really appreciate how you bring together things that I thought were separate, and you help me to see that they're not. And I'm deeply grateful for that.
Well, you are really welcome. And I just want to say that that's what happened to me, but it was over decades. Like when I intuited that connection to Samaria, but it really wasn't until I was doing the research for this book that I was like, oh yeah, that the people in southern India who were developing Tantra, both the Hindu Tantra and the Buddhist Tantra, a lot of them were highly influenced by Samaria. So it's like that. It's like, you know, we can intuit that things are connected, but until somebody mirrors that back to us, it's hard to rest in that, you know? So I really appreciate what you're saying. And, you know, if you're interested, this book that China Gallen wrote, Longing for Darkness, Tara and the Black Madonna, it was like 1990. That's how I ever even met Tara, because I was really into the Black Madonna. I didn't know anything about Tara. That was the beginning. So anyway, thank you for that. So I think sounds like a pilgrimage to me. Anyway, so yeah, I think if there are people you want to pray for tonight, please put them in the chat box, you know, and also hold them in your heart. And, you know, to hold yourself in your heart too. To think about what is it I really need? What is it I want to ask for that I really need? You know, Mother Mira likes to say, ask for everything. Don't stop at anything, ask for everything. So please do that for yourself, for your loved ones, for people who have, you know, crossed over, as somebody I can see put in there. Yeah. It's an important time to be able to do that. Okay, so why don't we begin? Well, we've already begun, but why don't we do the official sadhana practice? So I want to ask you all to go back to that very first moment that we came together, and just to go back to that place of noticing, you know, how are you breathing? How are you feeling? How are you feeling in your body? And to try to let go into the support that we all have, not only from the furniture, but from space itself, and from each other, and from all the intentions that we bring when we come together. Yeah, just to try to let yourself relax into that support with whatever you're bringing. And then to allow in your mind's eye to arise the image of space that's most compelling and beautiful to you. And, you know, we all have different favorite images of space. And let that one arise that is the one that is just really the most favorite for you. And then as you're gazing out at space, the vastness of it, these unlimited horizon, to really let yourself know that that is actually an image of your own awakened consciousness. Even if we have obstacles to feeling and knowing that, it really is. That is the nature of your own awakened consciousness. And that we're kind of held by that space. We actually have the space within us, and we're breathing into and out of that space and all the potential that's held by it. And then to imagine that everything could arise, anything could arise from all that potential, that we're going to invite the whole mandala of Tara to appear. And there again, there's a deep breath that wants to breathe you. Let that happen. And just imagine this entire mandala taking shape in front of us, with green Tara in the center. Any of y'all who need a refresher on what she looks like, you can just look right behind me. There she is. And then to imagine all of her emanations in the space behind her. And then to take a moment to imagine your teachers, the people you think of as your ancestors, regardless of whether they're related to you by DNA or not. Who are your spiritual ancestors? Who is it that when you think of them, you think, gosh, if it hadn't been for them and what they said and how they said it, I don't know that I'd even be here tonight. Think of all those teachers and guardians and guides and avatars, whatever, whoever. Think of them as your circle of care. And see them, they're kind of around Tara and they're around us. And feel the gratitude you have for them and let that flow out. And feel the love that they have for you. Let that come back to you. And then to imagine that you can put right in the center of this mandala at Tara's feet the concerns that you have for yourself, but also the concerns you have for anyone else who's living on this plane or in another plane. To bring all of that into this practice. And then to think for and with all of these beings, I am taking refuge in this vast awakened consciousness that Tara represents and embodies and also is inside of me. And that I'm taking refuge in all the texts, all the wisdom traditions, oral, written, whatever ones that are meaningful to you. I'm taking refuge in the Dharma, and that I'm taking refuge in all the sanghas I belong to, this one and the others, all the communities I might be part of, but also the communities of practitioners through the ages, hundreds and hundreds of years of people doing this practice, which is why we still have it, which is an amazing thought. So we take refuge in these things and we ask it through the power of giving and the other perfections. We could really wake up, that we could really wake up to the awakened consciousness that is inside of us in order to be of benefit to all living beings. And then we focus on the four immeasurables. We ask that all living beings would have happiness and the causes of happiness, that all living beings could be free from sorrow and the cause of sorrow, that all beings would come to realize we cannot be separated from the sacred happiness which is sorrowless, and that we might live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, and live believing in the equality of all that lives. Om Seba Vashuddha Sarva Dharma Seba Vashuddha Ham. That's also another, that's the mantra of emptiness. It's another call out to that vastness. And now we're going to imagine in the forefront of all that is this black, wrathful Tara. You just see her coming into the foreground. And she's seated on a lotus throne with a sun disk, and the sun disk is part of what alerts us to the fact that she is wrathful. She's black. It says she has a slightly wrathful expression, but some of the teachings say that she's very wrathful. And her right hand is open in the gesture of supreme giving. She's holding this black vase, which contains all kinds of weapons that destroy these interfering beings. I'll say more about that in a minute. But her left hand is at her heart in the gesture of refuge, which is so powerful. This fierce, wrathful female Buddha is an awakened being in whom we can take refuge, who protects us. And she's eminently beautiful and dressed in these silks and jewels. And I like to think of this sort of luminescent black light. I think of what it looks like when, if you can see it, when the sun hits the back of a crow, how that it just shines, that blackness. And she's adorned, her top three chakras are adorned with syllables Om Hum. The blue syllable hum in her heart begins to radiate blue light from her heart into the realms of the wisdom beings and the Inishchara deities, and invites them to come here, Ahehi Sahun Bamho. And because they promise to come to help liberate us, they do come. So we can just imagine all these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all these awakened beings, the beings of their mandalas, all these essential energies of Tara and all her emanations just come and fill up this space that we're in. And they really completely join with our visualization, becomes very vivid. And then we ask for purification. Om Sarva Tathagata Avashitsamam. So among the beings that have come are these white dakinis, these powerful female energies that can be from one place to the next instantaneously. And they're all carrying these white vases with this amazing nectar. And so we just imagine we have asked for purification. It's like we're asking for this Inishchara experience. And to just imagine that one of these dakinis is pouring this nectar into your open crown chakra. And I think this is where we use all our faculties of imagination, and we also just let it be. Whatever comes, comes. But I like to invite people, if you can kinesthetically imagine what it would be like if just this river of light was pouring through you. And as it's doing that, it's just really pulling out any kind of residual stuckness, stuck energies, difficult energies that may have, kind of taken up residence in these recent weeks and even months and years, but just to imagine that liquid light pouring through us and pulling all that out, and that all of that is leaving our bodies through the lower doors. And then we imagine one of the Dakinis pours this nectar into the open crown chakra of black Wrathful Tara. This one drop overflows and forms the Buddha Amitabha, the Buddha of infinite light. And he appears above her head, just above her crown, in a subtle body of red light. I never get tired of saying that his name actually means light without ceasing. So he's bringing all that energy into this practice space. And here I just like to encourage everybody to make what I call the personal offerings. So just imagine that you can offer Tara anything, including what the heck am I doing right now? You know, you can just offer her anything because honestly, there's nothing she hasn't seen. And we can also offer her positive things. You know, anything, hopes we have, things we hope the impossible might happen. We can offer her hopelessness. We can offer her anything. And just imagine that she takes every single thing we offer her. I also like to, you know, remember Mother Mira, who says you have to offer everything, that it doesn't matter what you offer. It's important just that you offer it. And that's what I think of with Tara. It's like she's just delighted because she knows what to do with anything and everything we offer her. So we do that. It's just like we hand it over. And imagine that she takes that. She takes everything we offer her. And I kind of imagine her transforming that into what I call a wisdom blessing, like she might give us some insight into what's behind all these different things we're offering, and that she just showers us with these wisdom blessings.
Do the tech people know she's frozen?
Yeah, I guess so, but I'm not sure what. Oh, it looks like she's unfrozen.
Maybe the ice storm knocked out the electricity.
Could be. Maybe it's Tara saying, right, Eric, I like that bang. Anyway, back to the offering, the offering practice. Actually, what Amirta Kandali is doing is removing our obstacles to seeing these offering substances as infinite and unlimited. You know, if any of you have put out offering substances like flowers or incense or candles, you know, and we think, well, here are my offering substances. Well, actually, what we're doing here is imagining just infinite offering substances probably beyond our capacity to imagine. And what he's doing is removing the obstacles to our being able to see that, know that, and understand it. And so then out of emptiness, the syllable Om is resonating and it's forming these amazingly large and beautiful jeweled vessels. And each one of those vessels has an Om inside of it. And then from those vessels are pouring these offering substances, clear, unhindered, and unending. Om Aham, Om Aham, Om Aham. Om Aryatara, Sapariwara, Argam, Pajam, Puspe, Dupe, Alake, Ganje, Navaje, Shabda Pratitya Soha. That's like this banquet of flowers and incense and candles and food and water that we're offering Tara and all the guests. We're saying, I hope you enjoy it. That's what that sentence actually means. Please participate. And then the praise. If you have it, you can read it, even though we're muted. I praise the one who stamps with her foot and strikes the surface of the world's foundation with the palm of her hand, whose frowning expression masters the 7 levels of the underworld through the syllable hum. And so now what we're going to imagine is from Tara's heart, and also from this vase, that very intense rays of light are streaming out in the form of flames, lightning, and weapons, which destroy enemies and gags. So this is where if you see some of the Hindu figures, you know, these with multiple arms and multiple weapons, that's this configuration here for Tara. And the idea is what she's really destroying is obstacles. It's really more like concepts, false concepts. We could call them complexes. We could call them, you know, an imperfect view. I like to think that she destroys the enemy that causes us to attack ourselves. And gags are, that's an old term that can mean something like a storm, like not necessarily a being exactly, but a, you know, a natural factor that sometimes likes to destroy things too. But I think the main idea is to imagine this light flaming out and really destroying any obstacles to our own connection with our own awakened nature and Tara's awakened nature. So here we go. And, you know, there may be some people new here tonight. So what we do is we recite this 108 times, and then we just rest in silence for a while before we come back to dedicate the practice. Om Taritu Taritu Vajra Mahapadye Basmin Kursoha. This mantra really means that Tara's, you know, foot, she's stomping these enemies out with her consciousness too. Om Taritu Taritu Vajra Mahapadye Basmin Kursoha. 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 Om Tari Tutari Vajra Mahapadiye 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 Basmi 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 Kursoha. So I would invite you to just tune into the energy and see what the energy around you, inside of you, feels like right now. I shouldn't be surprised anymore because it happens all the time when I practice the Black Wrathful Taras. I always expect all this fire and stuff, and instead things get incredibly quiet. And there's just a subtle, open space. It's really open. And in that space, it's like asking ourselves, you know, in times of really deep difficulty, what do I take refuge in? And I was just realizing, reciting those mantras, one can actually just rest into the mantra itself. Or the absence of stuff, you know, the absence of stimulation. But I really invite you to, you know, check this energy out, see what it feels like, see how you feel. See what it does feel like to think this is a space I can bring everything and I'm protected inside and out. That everything can be here at once, everything has a place. And it's all held by this great mother. And so now we start the process. We begin the process of ending the practice by first imagining this Black Wrathful Tara receding back into her place in the mandala. We take a look at the whole mandala again, all the beings. All the beings we've invited, all the beings we've been praying for. And then we just ask all the beings that came to help us, all the beings we've invited, we ask them to return to whatever realms they came from. And actually the realm might be in your next room, but still we release them from the practice space. We ask them to return to wherever they came from. And then we look again, we're just here with Tara and all her emanations. And you know, there's any number of ways to do this, but tonight what we might do is imagine all of those 21 emanations dissolving into green Tara until what we're seeing now is only green Tara. And we can just imagine her dissolving back into space. She's emanated from space. Now she's returning to space. And as she goes back into space, there's this huge spray of light. And she dissolves into light that goes throughout the entire universe. And it goes into other universes and it comes into us as well. And to imagine actually that it's just joining with the light of Tara that's in your own heart, so that the light of Tara is radiating from you. And so here we are, we're back where we started, we're back with space, envisioning that vast space and all its potential. And then we dedicate the practice. We ask that whatever merit, whatever positive potential, whatever goodness whatever contribution to the whole has been made by our doing this practice together, we're dedicated to the healing and awakening of all beings everywhere, with absolutely no exceptions. And we give thanks for Tara and the practice and the teachers and each other. This opportunity to be together. We just give thanks. That's called the grand exhale. So it's your turn, you know. If anyone would like to have something to say.
Yeah. Something came up for me a couple weekends ago. I in a family gathering on Zoom, there was a new person there, and she said some really racially problematic things a few times, and I don't think well on my feet. And somebody else changed the subject real quick, always, before I could figure out what to say, but it kind of really lit a fire under me, because I was all of a sudden like, okay, I've got to figure out how to respond in situations like that. And if I can't think, I've got to come up with at least some phrases that I can practice so that I can at least say something. But what also occurred to me was that, I mean, my knee-jerk reaction was really judgy. And I thought, you know, if that's the space I'm coming, I mean, that might not go well anyway, but if that's the space I'm coming from, it's really not going to go well. And during the practice just now, I was reminded of all the wrathful Taras and how that what they're wrathful about isn't us, not the people. So yeah, need some help working on that.
I bet you'll get it.
It's good to have a model.
Thank you, Lisa. You know, that's one of the things I remember that being one of the very first things that I got from, you know, these teachings back in the early 90s, that the enemies are not people. You know, they're the things that move people to doing and saying things that we really find difficult. And again, that's where I really appreciate Jung, because the idea of these autonomous complexes, you know, that song, something's got a hold on me, and it ain't good. And other people are subject to that too. So to think about asking Tara to dissolve those things. And it's interesting, I heard a Tibetan teacher talking recently about, you know, well, we can't always be nice. So one of the reasons we need the wrathful Taras is we can't always be nice. But I do think we can be firm and yet still not lose track of what you're saying.
Yeah, and oh shoot, I had a thought and it just went out of my head. But that was another thing that I noticed too, you know, while I freeze and can't think of the thing to say on the spot, like afterwards I was like, dang, the training to be polite is strong with me.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's somewhere in between there, like the not niceness is that ability to get out of the space of I just have to be polite at all costs. But that doesn't necessarily mean responding with the judginess.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, no. Things like what you just said really upsets me, you know, but
Yeah. And then I think, my God, Lisa, you're not the one that this is directed at. How much harder must it be to not,
Mm.
when you're the one who's dealing with this your whole life? Oh my God.
True that. Well, thank you for bringing all that. I appreciate it. It's the right place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to give us a teaching? Hey, Susan. You just muted yourself.
I just want to quote from a Zen poem, uh, 8th century Zen poem. This is just a portion of it. It says, within light, there is darkness, but do not try to understand that darkness. Within darkness, there is light, but do not look for that light. Light and darkness are a pair, like the foot before and the foot behind in walking.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
That's
Thank
from
you.
that's from the poem. It's called Sandokai, or the identity of relative and absolute.
Huh. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love that. Maybe one more person before we might want to go to bed or have tea or whatever we're going to do next.
This is Alma, and a friend of mine just told me last week about a book that's called The Book Lady of Troublesome Creek. And it's about a woman who lives in Appalachia in Kentucky.
Ah.
And she had, and this whole group of people, and some of them were from France, who were blue. And it's related, it's really true. And it's related to a blood disorder where they didn't get enough oxygen. And so they were literally blue people.
Wow.
But in Kentucky, they were considered colored. And she just is so, she talks about how people treated her and how she had to act. And her father was one of the coal miners, and how they treated him and everything. And it was, it just reminded me so much of what we're talking about today, with also the voting rights bill and everything. And so I just wanted to mention it because I just found it, I didn't want to read it at first, but then when I did, I couldn't put it down. It was just so unbelievably raw and just so real that
Say the name of it again.
The Book Lady of Troublesome Creek.
Okay. Thank you.
And it's a marvelous book. Anyway, I thought it was.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow.
I just want to say something that that happened to me today, and it makes so much sense in terms of Black Tara. And I was talking to a colleague. I called to thank her for being supportive to me in the university where I teach, and lately the university is a very interesting place to be. There's a lot of it's a lot going on. There's a lot of things are shaken up at the moment. And anyways, one of the things I'm trying to do is do this thing of actually speaking about the difficulties and the difference between calling people out and calling people in, and trying to actually put some of these things into practice. And so she said to me, and also I'm aware of like my own anger at times, which has always been a difficult thing, like to actually be angry or to be upset, And she said to me in a British accent, which I wish I could tell you, I wish I could do it in a British accent, but she said, Allison, you know, you used to meditate, and you might really like want to pick that back up again. And I was like, I was driving down the road. I had her on, you know, hands-free. I said, oh, I do meditate every day. And then it wasn't until the teaching tonight and I realized, oh, yes, you're meditating in a whole new full spectrum way. Like, and they're just not used to you showing up in that full spectrum way. So, oh, it was just so perfect tonight. I thought, oh yes, I'm not crazy. I'm just in a
Yeah,
very different practice, and people don't quite know what to do.
that,
I don't
that- that's
sometimes,
great.
yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, really. Us nice girls aren't supposed to be angry, right?
no, but also anger can be, you know, like the blade of grass coming through the sidewalk in the spring. You know, it's very productive at times. You know, it
Yes,
can
for
be
sure.
a necessary energy at times. You know.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that's actually what this man's name is, Zazep Rinpoche. I think that's part of what he was trying to say, is that sometimes we need that wrathful aspect. And then, you know, trying to see how to embody that in a way that's brings something. But yeah, it's really great to hear all the different things y'all saying and how they all weave in together with each other. So it might be time to sign off. This is a lot warmer than what's outside my door. I'll say that. Anyway, it's wonderful to see you all, and see you next month. You know, what happens next month is White Soothing Tara, which is also incredibly powerful. And I think it's interesting, whoever designed this structure, that she comes after the Black Wrathful Tara, that what comes next is the White Soothing Tara. But she's also very powerful. So anyway, I look forward to being with you all in February. See what happens next.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Rachel. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Yes,
Thanks,
thank you,
Rachel.
everyone.
Good night, everyone.